Now that the NBA draft is over, we start shifting gears to focus on the offseason. We've already had a flurry of some activity, and we can certainly expect that to pick up over the next couple of weeks. And for the Chicago Bulls, we know that something's coming. Like, you don't make the trade that you did mid-season to bring in a Vucevic to sit there and then come into this offseason and not do anything. That would just make absolutely no sense. They're going to have some cap space to play with, and they're going to play with it. Now, to me, personally, I think you're nuts if you think you're building a championship core and your 1 and 2 options are Levine and Vucevic. That, to me, seems insane. That seems to me you're building more of a 4 or 5 seed that maybe is satisfied with winning a playoff series here and there, and that's about it. My opinion, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Maybe some people feel differently. And if you do, I would love to hear that in the comments. Or follow me on Twitter and let me have it on there. Let me hear it. But they've made this bed. They're going to have to lie in it. Which means now that they've got to go out there and upgrade this roster. Because certainly last season did not finish how you might have anticipated. Especially once the Vooch trade was made. Like, you're thinking, okay, at least they'll be able to get into the playoffs. Like, this at least makes them a playoff team. And maybe once they get in there, they can create a little noise. And all that shit didn't happen. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Their defense was atrocious just in general. Like, front court, back court, doesn't matter. Perimeter down low. Like, if it was defense related, they sucked. And that was a consistent, steady theme throughout the entire season. It's also fair to say that they certainly lacked that facilitating point guard. They lacked that guy that could run the offense. They lacked that guy that could, take some of the pressure off Levine and Vucevic. They certainly lacked that. And, to nobody's surprise, you're seeing reports talking about the Bulls having very strong interest in Lonzo Ball. And if you didn't know that by now, you must have been living under a rock the past few months. Because a lot of us remember back at the trade deadline, we're talking about whether they were going to package maybe Lowry and Kobe, or maybe I was, but I know a lot of other people were talking about some type of package to bring in Alonzo Ball, especially if you're going to target him in free agency. Why the hell wouldn't you bring him in now and see what you got with him and Vooch and Levine playing together for a couple months? At the end of the day, it would have been nice if they did that. New Orleans, for some reason, didn't want to. I don't know why, but whatever. But it's no surprise that they're interested in somebody like Lonzo Ball. We also saw a recent report come out, and take it for what it was worth, but certainly seems viable, believable to me, that the Bulls will be interested in potentially reuniting with Derrick Rose. And, does that mean they're interested in Lonzo as option A, but Derrick Rose as option B? Does that mean that they're potentially interested in both of them? Like, you're bringing in Lonzo as the primary point guard, and you're going to bring in maybe Derrick Rose as the first guy off the bench? Like, then what do you do with Kobe White? What do you trade him for? What do you do with him? Like, who knows? We'll see how this plays out over the next few days. But, when it comes to the thoughts, the rumors of Lonzo Ball and Derrick Rose, I think they're interesting. And I can certainly see the point. I can certainly see why there's interest. But I think there's a little bit of tempering expectations that's necessary. I also think there's a piece to me that's a little concerned about kind of the yeah, but thing. Yeah, it would be nice to have Alonzo Ball, but at what price? Yeah, Alonzo Ball can do some nice things, but just really, what is his upside? Yes, it would feel great to bring back Derrick Rose, and he could certainly still bring something to a good team, but how much can you really count on him? But how much can you really expect out of him? And for both of these guys, yeah, but, maybe these guys can do this, but how much is that really worth? Feel like important fundamental questions that we need to talk through. And when I look at Lonzo Ball, he's 4 years into the league now. He's not a superstar. He's not a megastar, and he's never going to be. But it's clear he does some good things. Like, he's a high-quality perimeter defender, can defend multiple positions, the 1 through the 3 at least. And for the Chicago Bulls, God knows, just for the defensive abilities alone, he has a tremendous amount of appeal to Bulls fans and certainly the organization. And that makes logical sense. He's a guy that has become a serviceable, at least, outside shooter. So he's not somebody that defenses can be too comfortable with sagging off of to try and shade over to Levine and Vucevic. He can help space the floor a little bit. He could be a secondary facilitator and creator of shots for others and for himself. Like, I see the value. Like, he's an adequate rebounder for his position. He's not great or top level, but he's adequate. You know, he has some adequate skills. I think, obviously, his best skill is certainly on the defensive end. So there's a value there. There's a market for that. And there's certainly a need for that with the Chicago Bulls. But at what price? Like, what's your cap here? Like, how much do you really think those skills are worth? And think about it like this. When you talk about Lonzo Ball, I think in his first 4 years of his career, he's maybe had one season that he's played more than 55 games. It doesn't feel that off. So you're talking about these things that he can bring to the table, but he's also a walking injury waiting to freaking happen based off of the track record of the first 4 years of his career. You may think he has some unleashed or untapped potential or upside, but if he doesn't have the number one most important ability, which is availability, like, how much does that really matter? Like, how much do you really want to tie yourself to him? How much do you really want to count on him to be a certain level if you think there's a chance he might only play 55 to 60 games a year when you're talking about, when we get back to normal, hopefully an 82-game season? Like, how much is that really worth? Like, we'll see what the market kind of dictates here. But I'm sorry, to me, if you go anything about above 4 years and $80 million, I'm out. I'm absolutely out on Lonzo Ball. Because if you start talking about having to pay him $25 million a year or more, now you're talking about paying him $25 million, Vooch for the rest of his contract is in like 25 or something like that million, and pretty soon with Levine, while he's on a relatively valuable contract right now, if you're going to eventually give him the max, you're going to start talking about $40 million a year. You could be tying up most of your cap space to these three guys. Meanwhile, one of the three guys might only play 55 or 60 games a damn season. How much do you really want to tie up into a guy like that? Into a guy that's not a 20-point-per-game scorer. Into a guy that's not a high-level facilitator, creator with the dribble, like, not a league leader in assists. Like, how much is that really worth? You know, and realistically, he shouldn't be worth $80 million over 4 years, but I also understand NBA economics and the way the offseason cycle goes. Like, that's probably the minimum price. And if it stays around there, I could align with that. I could get with that. Because I could say, you know what? He's not perfect, but he's pretty good. And he's certainly better than anything that they have. And at least coming in there, he's going to be in a big market again like he was in LA, so that certainly should make him happy. You know, God only knows what LeVar is going to bring to the table. That would be an interesting dynamic for Chicago and Chicago media, the organization, the fans, all of that. But if you're talking about 4 years, $80 million, I could accept that. Because I could see the value that he can bring. Much more than that, and I'm sorry, but I'm out. And for Derrick Rose, like, I do feel like it's important that we have this conversation. Look, Derrick Rose is a former league MVP. He is a former face of the franchise. It's kind of sad and tragic that his tenure in Chicago ended the way that it did. We should still be talking about the tail end of Derrick Rose's peak in Chicago, and hopefully with a championship ring or two along the way for the hometown kid. And what a great, wonderful story that could have been that never was. Fuck you, Thibodeau. Jackass. But, you know, it seems like Bulls fans are getting caught up in the excitement of the nostalgia of the past of what Derrick Rose used to be and not really focusing on what Derrick Rose is now. Derrick Rose is still a really good NBA basketball player, don't get me wrong. He certainly provides value, and he certainly makes sense in today's game as that valuable sixth man. And if the Bulls brought him in to play that role, I love it. But you're not getting franchise player Derrick Rose. You also got to remember that this is a guy over the past several seasons has barely been able to play 50 games. Again, how much is that worth? He might give you 14 to 15 points a game off the bench, playing 25, 28 to 30 minutes. He's not going to give you a ton as a facilitator. He'll give you a little bit, but not a ton. You know, he's not going to give you a ton on the defensive end, certainly. Like, what's that really worth? Now, would he give the Bulls a hometown discount? I don't know. Would he want to leave Tibbs? I don't know. And the Knicks? I don't know. I personally would enjoy the thought of him coming back in the right role for the right price. To me, the right price for a Derrick Rose is something like a 2-year, $20-ish million contract with the second year being a player option. Gives him a little incentive to play well in his first year back home. You know, say, hey, you play well, like you could potentially opt out and get more money from us or somebody else. But if you don't play as well, we can still keep you for a second year, and it's only $10 million, so it's not that expensive to keep you, or it's not that hard to potentially move you elsewhere if it doesn't work out after the first year. I'm good with that. Like if you told me the Bulls are going to sit there and bring in a Lonzo Ball and a Derrick Rose, I'm cool with that. Like they have the cap space to do it. Do I think that's potentially allocating too many cap resources into one position? Perhaps, but I could work with that. Then you think about, well, what do you do next after that? Well, shit, maybe you do some sign and trade crap with Lowry and package up him and White and future first round pick and something else, and maybe go to Toronto and try to get Pascal Siakam. Like Bulls fans talking about Ben Simmons, you're freaking insane. What the hell would you want him for? Especially at his price. What? I'd much rather have Lonzo Ball at a $20-ish million price per year for what he does, where I don't have to hide him in the fourth quarter because not only can he defend, but he's at least adequate from the perimeter as a shooter versus a guy that's terrified of shooting and absolutely sucks at it to the point where he's such a liability, you don't even want to have him on the floor in the fourth quarter, especially in clutch time and especially in playoff situations. And you got Bulls fans, some of them talking about Ben Simmons is perfect for this team. You want to tithe over the next 4 years, excuse the F out of me, $33, $35, $37, and $40 million worth of cap space respectively, each of the next 4 seasons, into Ben Simmons to be a limited-ass all-star? You're nuts! You could damn near probably get Lonzo and Derrick Rose for the same price as Ben Simmons and get much better value. Get guys that can actually be on the floor in clutch. Be guys that you actually have in your winning time lineup. Like, if you're talking about winning time lineup for the Bulls right now, if you brought in Lonzo and a Derrick Rose, it's Lonzo, it's Derrick, it's Levine, it's Pat, and it's Vucevic. That's probably your winning 5, if you will. Or if you're keeping Thaddeus Young, maybe Thad is part of that, and you're yanking out of Vucevic for defensive reasons. Like, Ben Simmons, you're nuts, especially with that contract. If the Bulls start thinking about giving $25+ million to a guy like Lonzo Ball, you better hope to God he stays healthy. Because if he's only going to give you 50, 55, 60 games, he ain't going to be worth it, I promise you. Like, have enough courage to say, yeah, we want him, but we're not desperate. Yeah, we'd like to have him, but nah, it's got to be right. $20 million a year could be right. $25+ million a year, that's wrong. Run away. As far as Derrick Rose goes, like I said, something like 2 years, $20 million-ish, player option for the second year, that could work. Anything more than that, unless you give him more money but it's on a 1-year deal, you got to let the nostalgia go and think about it with a basketball dollars and cents standpoint and say this doesn't really work. Now, these guys don't make the Bulls a championship contender, and I want to be clear. And I still don't think the core built around Vucevic and Levine is ever going to be a true championship contender. I hope to be proven wrong, but I certainly don't fucking see it. But nonetheless, guys like Lonzo and Derrick Rose would certainly at least be a step in the right direction. It'd be something a little bit closer to a big market move that a big market team should be making at this point in time. Won't fix everything, but it certainly won't hurt.